right. Hello, everyone. We are so happy to have you here with us on the Stronger Marriage webinar produced by the Utah Marriage Commission, hosted by Utah State University. I am Naya Phelps, and we are so excited to have you joined with us today. In today's webinar, we are so excited to be joined by Aimee. Aimee serves as a senior advisor to Governor Cox and director of the Utah Office of Families. She has championed social media legislation and education, home visiting programs for vulnerable families, and many upstream policies to strengthen families in Utah so children have better outcomes. Her previous roles include planning commissioner, city communications director, executive for a biotech company, small business owner, and a board member for several organizations, including Prevent Child Abuse Utah. She was a 2020 candidate for Utah governor. In 2024, she was recognized by Utah Business Magazine as one of Utah's most influential women. Aimee also serves part-time on the County Council and chairs the Salt Lake County Intergenerational Poverty Task Force. Aimee is a graduate of the University of Utah. She and her husband Matt have been married for over 30 years and have raised 4 children. They are proud grandparents and love to travel with their growing families. Make sure you stay on until the end of the presentation. We have a short survey that we would like for you guys to take. Just a reminder for everybody that the chat will be turned off, so if you have any questions throughout the webinar or at the end of the webinar, put them in the Q&A box, which can be found down below. We will now turn the time over to Aimee for her presentation.
Well, thanks, Naya. I am excited to be here today. And, as I was looking through some of the past webinars, I thought, oh, this is not me as a professor or as a marriage counselor or anybody else giving advice. This is kind of more of a political science. Let's talk about how government handles complicated issues like marriage and family. And so, anyway, I hope you'll find this interesting to at least see from a government lens what we have to think about when we're making policy decisions. So, today, I want to talk a little bit about the state of Utah's efforts to support marriage and family. First, I want to talk about Utah and what we have going for us, what makes us special. And then I want to talk about Governor Cox's vision, and we'll end by sharing some of the priorities of the governor's new Office of Families. So I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll kind of go from there. So let's talk about the state of Utah. Here are some of our rankings as a state. We are the most independent state. We have the best economic outlook. We're the cheapest state to start a business. We're the best state to move to. We have the best business climate in the country, the best environment for social mobility, and the best state for the middle class. Pretty awesome, huh? We also, this is pretty cool. The US News and World Report ranks Utah the #1 best state. And this is the third year in a row we've gotten this. So, what makes us the best state? Is it our economic strength, jobs, economy, the fact that we're well managed? Is it the beauty? I mean, we've got these awesome mountains and national parks. We've got great outdoor recreation. Or is it the people, our strong families, our social capital? Well, let's explore a little bit. I think one of the secrets to our success as a state is our strong families and our social capital. There's so many things that government can't give people that families and communities can. And we have states all around the country who come to us and say, "What is Utah doing? Why are you guys doing so well in these different categories?" A lot of states are trying to spend all kinds of taxpayer dollars to get their state in a place that we are in some of these rankings, and they can't seem to do it no matter how much money they spend. And so it's something that begs the question, why? Why do we have such strong families and good social capital, which then lead to these other successes? So let's talk for a minute about it. Governor Cox, when he was recently reelected and in his inauguration speech, he talked about social capital. And I'm going to show you a clip here in a minute. Social capital refers to the bonds between people and among networks, which can be used to benefit themselves and the group as a whole. There's your technical definition. But it's derived by things like family unity and interaction, volunteerism and charitable giving, religious or other community involvement, and civic engagement. So here's a little clip from the governor.
And if we only measure financial capital, Utah may fall short by many measuring sticks. But you see, where we truly shine, and this is the secret to our success, is something a little more obscure called social capital. Experts describe social capital as the connections among individuals and the norms of reciprocity and trustworthiness that arises from them. Several studies have shown that Utah leads the nation in social capital, and there really isn't a close second. Social capital is measured in categories like family unity and interaction, social support, and institutional effectiveness. It includes rates of service and volunteering, philanthropy, and something called civic virtue. Most importantly, social capital is not created by government. It is created in our families, our congregations, our neighborhoods, in our volunteer organizations. You see, here's the point. The incredible things that we have been able to accomplish over the past 4 years happened because of our strong social capital. And if we want to continue to cut taxes, create jobs, build infrastructure, lift people out of poverty, and make the American dream a reality for the next generation, we need more of it. And it can only happen one family, one neighborhood, and one community at a time.
Okay. So, what I loved about that speech, and you should look it up if you didn't see his inauguration speech in 2025, go and Google it because he talks about the people in his life that made him who he is, his scout leaders, um, his friends' parents next door who took in the kids as their own and did things as mentors and to help them. And he talks about these different people and how they've impacted them. And as we look broadly at what makes us a good state and why we have these great things like lowest child poverty rate in the US, the lowest rate of single parent households. We have a high number of kids being raised in a married couple family, and we're among the lowest divorce rates. As we look at the things that make us successful, having people understand how they can impact others is a really important piece of that. So the governor recognized that we want to do more to strengthen families. And in 2022, he started my office, the Office of Families. I was lucky enough to be hired as the first director, and I'm basically his family policy advisor. So we look at policies that are inhibiting strong families and those that can better help families become stronger. That's kind of my charge. And so it's actually, I got to be honest, don't tell anyone. It's like the coolest job I never knew that I wanted. Like it has been such a fun job to be able to do this because there's so many things to do. But I'll tell you, the thing that gets hard too is recognizing that government can't necessarily change some of these things. It has to be each of us individually. That being said, I'm going to share with you my three focus areas that I'm focusing on related to proactive prevention, upstream policy to strengthen families so we get better outcomes for our kids. So, the three focus areas prioritizing marriage, protecting children, and supporting parents. And you may say to yourself, why, how is government going to help marriages? It's tricky, right? I mean, this really is an individual decision, but I'm going to share with you some of the things that we like to share as far as data and things related to marriage. So the data shows it's so clear that children raised with two parents in the home have better upward mobility and fewer social service needs in their life. It is so clear. It's funny, sometimes politically people don't love that and they try to argue it, but the data, we have economists who are on the right of the political spectrum and some on the left, many on the left of the political spectrum, who are showing data related to this. I love this quote. The percentage of marriage in a given state is a stronger predictor of the state's economic mobility, child poverty, and median family income than the education level, racial makeup, and age composition of its population. So marriage is really a big key. And sometimes, when we look at why does government get involved in the subject of marriage, that's why, because we see so many of societal ills dissipate when we know kids are in a two-parent home. That being said, we recognize everybody has different situations. Sometimes being in a marriage that's abusive is absolutely something that you need to leave and move on and do something different. There are absolutely those outliers where it's not a good thing. But by and large, for people, being married is such a good thing. And it takes hard work. I've been married for 32 years this year. And my husband and I can attest, we've had to work really, really hard. And that's everything from, lots of apologies, even if you didn't think you were the one at fault, to sometimes seeing a therapist and talking through things and being able to work on yourself and figure out what you need to improve. Um, Investing in date nights, I'm a big fan of that. Even when our kids were little, all my kids are now in their 20s, but when they were little, we would go on a date every single weekend and we would pay a babysitter or we did a babysitting co-op or luckily they got older and they could tend themselves. But we would do that and prioritize that. And it takes a lot of work. So, anyway, I want to talk about why marriage is so important because honestly, we're starting to get worried when we see young people think marriage is not important or they're delaying marriage and pretty soon they decide that that's not something for them. And so, we want to talk about marriage because it is so important. So, marriage predicts happiness. Um, this is such a big issue. People don't realize a lot of people gripe about marriage and, oh, it's so hard. And it is hard. It is absolutely hard. But recent research from the University of Chicago indicates that for both men and women, marriage is the most important differentiator of who is happy in America. Meanwhile, failing marriage rates are a chief reason why happiness has declined nationally, according to that same study. The research found an astounding 30 percentage point happiness gap between married and unmarried Americans. Now, other factors do matter, including income, educational achievement, race, and geography, but marital status is most influential when it comes to predicting happiness in this study. What's more, other research indicates that the United States is witnessing a growing happiness divide between the most educated and the least educated Americans, and marriage is likely the biggest driver of that decline. We don't want that. We don't want people who have means to be the only ones getting married because we see such a big difference in even low income families and those in poverty who are in a two-parent home. All right. Secondly, marriage affects children. This is kind of a no-brainer. Two is always better than one, right? But we see a few things. First of all, children thrive with stable caregivers. They're more likely to get that from married parents. Children born to married parents are about half as likely to see their parents break up as children born to unmarried parents who are living together. So that stability is really important. Obviously, children take lots of resources, and it's easier to provide that financial stability if you're married. The likelihood of a married parent family being in poverty was between a fifth and a third that of families headed by a single parent, according to a 2019 data from the US Census Bureau. Kids from married couples tend to have better upward mobility. For kids growing up in the lowest income bracket, 4 out of 5 who were raised by married parents rose out of that income bracket as adults. Those raised by single parents had only a 50% chance of doing the same. So this is a big deal for our kids. Okay, this one's interesting too. Marriage affects financial success. Now, that one seems like some of this we can assume if you have two people who now can share a household and share those expenses, of course, that's going to be better. So I'm going to read to you a little bit of data on this. Stably married men heading into retirement have 10 times more assets than their divorced or never married male peers. The transformative power of marriage for men translates into a marriage premium, really, where married men earn about 10 to 20% more than their peers with roughly similar backgrounds. There's so much data that show that when people are married, they do better in work, in their careers. They have that they're more successful because of that support. Women, for in 2020, married mothers ages 18 to 55 had a median family income of 108,000 compared to 41,000 for childless single women of the same ages. As married mothers head into retirement in their 50s, they've accumulated 322,000 in median assets compared to 100,000 for their single childless peers. So for both men and women, it's a big difference financially. Finally, married women are 80% less likely to be poor, and married men 50% less likely to be poor net of controls. And both are much more likely to prosper in their 50s headed towards retirement. This is showing some US data from the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth. This tracks individuals in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s and shows over time how respondents slowly increase their net worth. So if you notice, married respondents experience per person net worth increases of 77% over single respondents, and their wealth increases an average of 16% each year of marriage. Okay, let's talk about the importance of marriage and mental health. People are reporting better mental health when they're married. In a 2021 study published by the Social Science Quarterly, it found that married individuals consistently reported better mental health, specifically fewer days of depression, anxiety, worry, and loss of interest in life. Also, mental health among married individuals did not decline nearly as much in response to the deteriorations in the labor market and job prospects as it did among their unmarried counterparts. We know the suicide rates among divorced adults is more than 3 times that of married adults, while the suicide rate among singles is 1.5 to 2 times the rate among those who are married. So, in other words, marriage is a protective factor for suicide risk. Being lonely is not fun. It's not good for anybody. So that's part of it. This I found really interesting and I wanted to share it. So while single parent homes are starting to become the norm in many states, luckily Utah still has a high rate of two-parent homes, the highest in the nation. But I thought this was interesting. The US has the highest percentage of single parent households with children under 18 in the world. Isn't that interesting? Look at these other countries, and you would think, oh, the US, we're doing so well in so many different areas, and yet we have the highest percentage of single parent households with young children under 18 than any other country in the world. Quite sad, actually. We are so lucky to have the Utah Marriage Commission. And that's one of the things that I get to do working as the governor's family policy advisor is I get to be the liaison with the Utah Marriage Commission. And this commission was started under First Lady Jackie Leavitt years ago, 20 plus years ago, and it's now housed at Utah State University. You can go to their website, strongermarriage.com, for information on the different things that they do. In fact, you may have found this webinar at that website. But they do podcasts, they have a relationship assessment, there's opportunities to get discounts on marriage licenses, there's e-courses, and again, webinars like this one. And then also, we're lucky to have USU Extension that hosts healthyrelationshipsutah.org. They have other classes as well, and some additional ones related to step families, singles, and parents. Twice a month, they host free healthy relationship webinar. They have different topics like dating and marriage, divorce and remarriage, communication, improving your sexual relationship, loyalty, and commitment. So there's so many good resources that are free, and we just want to make sure people know about them. And so we're really grateful for the work that the Utah Marriage Commission does. And as somebody who is an office of one, just myself in the Office of Families, I'm so grateful for people and organizations like the Utah Marriage Commission who do so much heavy lifting and that we can work with to move some of these priorities forward. I'm going to share now a few other priorities that the Office of Families and Governor Cox are interested in and working on. This one, embracing the success sequence. There is data that shows if you graduate from high school, work full-time, and then marry before having children, you have a 97% chance of avoiding poverty. This was the Brookings Institution that came out with this. And as you see the data, it's pretty clear that this is such an important thing. Most kids don't realize this. If you do it in this sequential order, It is really, really important. So again, finish high school, get a full-time job, and then get married before having children. Obviously, if you do it in a different order and you get pregnant in high school, it makes it a lot harder to avoid poverty into your adulthood. And so we want all of our kids to know this. So we've been able to work with different organizations like the Marriage Commission, Utah Marriage Commission, Sutherland Institute, Granite School District, and others to try to get the success sequence in education curriculum in Utah schools. And so that's something that we've worked on and we are doing it. We've done it. So there will be new curriculum in the financial literacy and also I believe in maybe the health requirement for high schools. And so that's really exciting because we feel like this is an important thing for kids to know. All right. Another thing that we think about when we're prioritizing marriage and thinking about the future of Utah is we want people to understand how important the replacement rate is. So, for those who don't know, a replacement rate is saying each couple should have 2.1 children to replace themselves. Um, you would think Utah, with these big families and everything, that we are number one in birth rate. We used to be long time ago. Then we dropped to fourth. And just this last year, we got word we are now 10th highest birth rate in the nation. So come on, people, have those babies. They are so fun. I can attest. I now am a grandma, and it's worth having kids so you can get to those grandkids because they're fun. So, but Utah's birth rate's now 1.801 per couple. And again, 2.1 is what you would need to maintain population stability. Now, a lot of people are like, well, why am I worried about this? This is the last thing I need to be worried about. Let me tell you some of the economic concerns if we continue on this path. And some countries like China and Japan are seeing this now, and now they're doing whatever they can to incentivize people to have kids because it's hurting their economy. But you think about it, if people only have, one or two kids or no kids, and we have a larger portion of our population who are elderly, who are not working, then we don't have enough people who are actually working age. So it would create labor shortages. It means you don't have people paying into retirement systems like Social Security and Medicare, yet you have high users of that. So that becomes a problem. It weakens community cohesion and means that we have fewer support networks. I don't know about you guys, but I grew up in a family. I had four siblings. I have like dozens of cousins, and they all live nearby. And we do stuff with our cousins all the time and our aunts and uncles. And we do monthly family meeting, the Winder family meeting every month. And that support network is so good for kids. It's such a good protective factor for kids. When we don't have those support networks, when we don't have siblings or other people in our age group, it does increase individual isolation and loneliness. So it's funny because there was a recent study that just came out the other day. In fact, it was on KSL radio yesterday talking about this, that showed people don't really think that, talking about birth rates and encouraging people to have babies is like a big priority, should be a big priority. And yet, I liken that to the discussions that we have about the Great Salt Lake. 20 years ago, nobody was really talking about the Great Salt Lake and a concern of it drying up and dust and, toxic dust and all of that. Well, what happens is a few years of drought and seeing where the potential could be, and suddenly everybody's talking about it, right? And we're trying to find solutions to fix it or to make sure it doesn't happen. I predict the same thing will happen with replacement rates. The only way you overcome a lower replacement rate is by immigration, having more people migrate into your country so that you can meet the labor demands and paying into the system. So anyway, I just think it's good to talk about that so people understand why this is important. So anyway, and babies are the best. So remember that ultimately. All right. My second priority, I told you there were three, the prioritizing marriage, there's protecting children, and then supporting parents. So we're going to talk about some of the priority policy that we have for protecting children. Um, As we look at this, we appreciate other partners again who have worked on this issue. So let's talk about child abuse prevention first of all. We've worked with the Policy Project and Prevent Child Abuse Utah on ensuring more children receive prevention training and information in schools. It's such a big priority. It's such an important thing. I served on the Child Abuse Utah board for several years. Love the work that they're doing. But the reason why it's good to invest in child abuse prevention is because when kids go through trauma and have a lot of childhood trauma, it translates into other issues later on. If you have a high ACEs score, which is adverse childhood experiences, your likelihood of mental health and physical health challenges rises. Um, we've got issues with potential incarceration or drug use or other mental health issues that become expensive for taxpayers. And so we want to minimize, if I could wave my magic wand and get one thing taken care of in this world, it would be having no childhood trauma because it impacts so many other things later on in life. Um, Let's go to healthy pregnancies. This is a big one that we care about because we have a lot of moms in Utah who may be on Medicaid that are pregnant. And if they have preterm delivery and that baby's in the NICU or has a lot of health problems, that becomes really expensive for taxpayers because Medicaid is taxpayer funded. And so we want healthy pregnancies for these moms. We want them to go full term. We want them to be very successful. And we are creating an app so that we can give them more information about services that can help them and help them to be more successful. And so we're really excited about that. The third one I want to talk about with protecting children is youth mental health. This is a huge priority of the governor. And we recognize that since 2010, there have been massive mental health declines in our youth. As the governor and I have talked about the behavioral health and mental health of our kids, we realize we're not going to have enough therapists to take care of everybody. Like it's a massive problem. And so we had to look upstream at what is causing these mental health issues. So I'm going to show you a few slides from my another presentation that I do about social media and devices, just so you can understand why this is a major concern for the governor. So this graph shows how depression has doubled for US teens. Now you can look from 2010 to 2020 among both boys and girls, you see an increase, but note the large increase to girls. Both rates are going up. But for girls, especially girls going through puberty, social media is incredibly harmful. And we see that in the data. And if you'll note, some of these data sources we're looking at 2009, 2010, because what happened during that time? Smartphones became a big deal. Social media became more popular. And so that's where we're seeing the drastic changes. This one too, if you look from 2009, you can look at emergency room visits for self-harm by children and adolescents and how it rose so quickly. If we saw cancer rates in children rise this drastically, we would be clamoring for solutions and figure out ways to prevent it. And for some reason with social media, we've kind of shrugged our shoulders and been like, well, that's the new world we're in. Let it be. And that's not okay for our governor. So we've been doing some things. Let me talk about national data. Here's some good data points on youth mental health. I think the one that's so disturbing on this is that almost 60% of teen girls say they've been contacted on social media by a stranger in ways that made them feel uncomfortable. Incredibly alarming and concerning. Social media was created to help aid in connection, and yet people are feeling lonelier than they have ever before since the invention of social media because in-person human interaction is where we get the most lift for our mental health. Here's some more. Body image. We see a lot of impact on body image, especially for young women when they're on social media. And then the CDC shows 57% of teen girls are persistently sad or hopeless. That's a high percentage. So let's look at the Utah data. This is from the SHARP survey, which is the Student Health and Risk Prevention Survey. We love the Sharp survey. It gives us a great 30,000-foot view of what's happening in the lives of kids. It has multiple questions. It's a confidential, anonymous survey, and it helps us see where some trends are that we need to be worried about and make some different policy decisions. But anyway, here's some of our Utah data. Only 38% of youth got 8 or more hours of sleep on an average school night. So, what happens when you don't get enough sleep? Your depression and anxiety increases. You can't learn as well. There's so many negative effects from that. Um, we're seeing more kids spending time on electronic devices than ever before. Here's some more data right here. Almost 18% of Utah youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. That's concerning for us, as well as the rates of loneliness and isolation. And I had mentioned the CDC data, 57% of teen girls in the US felt persistently sad or hopeless. In Utah, it was 53% of female high school age students. These are some of the harms of social media that we see. Frankly, the addictive algorithms create some of the greatest problems for youth and adults. So there's so many different things that are happening to our kids, and we're concerned about it. So we've been able to really make a commitment to youth mental health and recognize that devices are impacting the mental health of our kids. So, a few things that we're doing. We are reining in social media companies through legislation and lawsuits. We had a couple of bills passed in 2023 to help rein in social media companies. They were repealed and replaced in 2024 to make them stronger and more likely to hold up in court. We do have those going through the court process right now. And in addition, our Division of Consumer Protection and the Attorney General's office is suing several social media companies for harm to kids. So, Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok has 2 lawsuits that the state of Utah has filed against them. Another thing we're doing is we've been trying to educate parents on the harms of social media. So we did a whole campaign where we talked about the different harms because we found a lot of parents didn't realize. And they were ads that we did where we had a mask on a kid's face that was smiley and looked happy and they're scrolling. And then when you take off that mask, they're crying. And it's showing how so many of our kids are hurting inside, but we don't realize it. And as parents, we've got to start setting some other boundaries. We are reducing cell phone usage in schools, which is so important. Governor has asked the schools to have a cell phone policy. He sent out a letter about a year and a half ago to all of our schools saying, please get a cell phone policy in place. His preference is to have a bell to bell policy where from the start in the morning until the last bell, those cell phones are put away because those kids just need a mental break from, all of the stimulation and bullying, potential bullying, and other things that are happening. And so we want kids to be able to focus on learning and developing relationships. We have a high school, Granger High, who did a bell to bell policy this past school year. And it was fun to talk to the principal. He said, our lunchroom was so loud after we did it this past school year. Like it was just so loud. And we realized it's because kids are talking to each other now instead of just being on their phones scrolling during lunch. And so it's a happy sound. And they've just found a lot of success with doing this. This last legislative session, we had a legislator who passed a law, or the whole legislature passed a law introduced by Senator Fillmore and Representative Welton. But this law said that schools can develop their own cell phone policies, but if they don't have one, the default policy is no cell phones in classrooms. So just know throughout the state of Utah now, cell phones are not allowed in classrooms, and that's a good start for us. I just need to say how important it is for quality time without devices. Again, that human connection is so important. We really, really need families to spend time together. In fact, the governor proclaimed the week of June 9th Family Connection Week and encouraged families to disconnect so that they could reconnect. And hopefully some of you got to participate in that. So let's talk about on this topic. This is one of my favorite topics that I get to work on, but let's talk a little bit about how you can help. You may be a parent, you may be a young adult watching this, but think ahead. If you're not a parent yet, there's some things that you can do. The first one, create a family media plan. Figure out ahead of time, sit down with your kids and agree on what are we going to do? How are we going to treat family media, or how are we going to treat TV, social media, devices, all of that? When is it appropriate to have it out? What kinds of things are appropriate for our home? And really get those boundaries set in place so that it's easier to hold up on those boundaries when the time comes. Turn off all screens during family meals and activities. You would not believe the data that we see on the importance of family meals. It's so critical for kids. We see a direct correlation. The number of meals a kid's having with their family in a week completely correlates to other potential negative behaviors like vaping or tobacco use or criminal activity or so many other things. And so those family meals are still, while it may sound old fashioned, it's still critical for kids. I even say, I get it. Sometimes you're busy. Even if you're eating Chick-fil-A, sitting at the table together and chatting with your devices put away, that's great for kids to be able to talk to you. Prohibiting devices in bedrooms, bathrooms, and an hour before bedtime is really important so that kids get a chance to take a break from their devices. Avoid using screens as pacifiers, babysitters, and to stop tantrums. We are seeing some issues right now where people are letting little ones be on screens and using that to pacify them. And then when they get into preschool or even kindergarten, they can't self-regulate. They don't know their emotional their social and emotional skills are lacking. And so we really there's some good screen time recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics that we encourage you to look at. And then learn about and use parental controls on whatever media you may be letting your child use. Another good tip, work with other parents to establish shared norms and practices. So if you have teenagers, getting with your kids' friends' parents and saying, hey, let's agree on what our rules are going to be on phone use and social media at each other's homes, then your kid's not the only one who may have different rules. This is a big one. The governor says this all the time. Reconsider allowing your child to use social media. In fact, his own daughter, when she was a teenager, he did not allow her to use social media till she was 18. So that's a good tip. If you can do that, that's really the best for kids. I would also refer you to a book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's a really good book talking about devices, and his recommendation is don't give your kids a smartphone until they're in high school, and don't let them have social media till they're at least 16. So those are his recommendations. Um, you can visit the website socialharms.utah.gov to learn more about our social media campaign that we did and get some more tips and data and information. All right, so let's go to number 3, supporting parents. So this is the last of the 3 priority areas. We are interested in things like family-friendly workforce policies. If employers are doing things to help create a family-friendly environment for their workers, maybe that's hybrid work schedules, maybe that's some flexibility on when they can come in or leave, depending on if they have kids that they need to pick up or take to school. Being able to give adequate parental leave is a big deal. Um, those are things that we really care about and we think are really good for our state. Creating a sense of purpose for boys and men. So we are working with Sutherland Institute. We started a men and boys task force because we knew so many people were working on issues related to women and girls. In fact, at Utah State University, Susan Madsen is doing a great job working on those issues, but nobody was really working on boys and men and looking at the things where the data is showing some gaps for them. And so our task force looks at things like educational and vocational training and overall health there, both mental and physical health for men and boys, and then just the overall sense of well-being. And Sutherland just did a survey to look at that sense of well-being for men and boys to see where the gaps are and some things that we can do to recommend for policymakers. Another one is high quality childcare, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then working to reduce benefit cliffs for those on government assistance. We worry a lot about people who are on government assistance, and then when they take a raise or a promotion and lose their benefits, that they may be upside down. And so, whether it's a perception or reality, we worry about them declining a raise or promotion because of fear of losing their benefits. And so that's an issue we're looking at is how do we better taper people off of benefits and make sure that they know that they can do that. We want people to be self-sufficient. And then another one, home visiting program for vulnerable families. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that one in just a second as well. So let's talk about childcare. This is a super tricky policy issue, and I'll show you why in a minute. We believe that parents know best for their children. So if a parent is like, this is what I need to do for my child, I need to put my child in daycare and I need to work so that I can provide, we support that. If a parent thinks, it's better if one parent's staying at home and taking care of kids, we support that. If they think grandparents are best suited to care for their children, we support that. Whatever parents think is best for their kids, we believe they know better than government what is best for their kids. We recognize that there's some things that government needs to do better. For instance, a lot of times when childcare providers go to government entities like cities or municipalities to get business licenses, sometimes they have to go through a lot of red tape. They, may be asked to do expensive things like bury power lines, or they may have to put in a certain type of expensive caterer's kitchen if they're serving food. And there's a whole bunch of different things that sometimes hoops they have to jump through. So one of the things we're working on this next legislative session is how do we reduce some of those things that aren't really necessary that can help make it work for childcare providers. Another thing that we advocated for and that got passed the last few years is a child tax credit for families. It taps out at about $75,000 a year for a household. But it's a tax credit up to $1,000 for kids 0 to 5. And so we believe that that's a great way to help families. And there's also a federal child tax credit that you may have heard about on the news recently that was just passed. So tax credits are great to help families get a little bit of a lift when they have kids, because sometimes that's a really expensive time of life. Background checks are now required for all providers, all childcare providers who may be caring for children, whether it's in-home childcare or it's in a facility somewhere else. They are required, which is a really good thing. Low income, some people say, well, what about low income families? Should we be helping them? Well, we do. As a state, low income families can qualify to receive monthly stipends to help with childcare. And so there's some criteria that they need to look at there, but the Department of Workforce Services does provide those stipends for families. We also are big believers that businesses should step up and provide childcare benefits to retain good workers. That's been something we hear from so many people. There's a lot of people who love those on-site childcare facilities at their employer's place of business. That's a great option for them. There's some employers who are giving their employees a caregiving benefit where they'll give them so much a month to go towards caregiving. We have employers who are offering large parental leave benefits. And this is something that really impacts our childcare issue because infants are the most expensive age group to pay for childcare. So when we have employers who are giving 3 to 6 months of paid leave for new moms, that's music to our ears because it does two things. One, it helps reduce the childcare costs for that family. And two, that helps with mother-infant bonding. And we have a lot of companies who are giving parental leave too, which is wonderful. So anyway, hats off to our businesses who are doing these things to help their employees and to help all of our families. Okay, so I said I want to talk a little bit about the tax policy thing and why childcare is a tricky issue. A lot of people are saying, why doesn't government just subsidize childcare? And boy, we have a lot of industries who say government should just subsidize. But here's why this is tricky is this survey was done a few years ago. This is from the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, but it shows a two-parent household with kids under 6 and what their ideal and current employment status is. So if you look at the middle box, you can see 43% of families say that their ideal is one full-time worker and one stay-at-home parent. The box to the left of that shows 33%. It shows that that's how many can actually do that because it's expensive to give up an income, right? If you look to the right, 32% in the red box, 32% prefer one full-time worker and one part-time worker, and yet only 26% can do that. And then the far left shows 17% say their preference is two full-time workers. So we have 43% of our families that say they would love to have a full-time parent at home. And some do that, a lot do that, a third approximately. So it gets tricky when we say government should subsidize childcare because then you've got a family who just gave up one income to stay at home. Do we take more of their tax dollars just to subsidize somebody else's childcare? That's why we like things like the child tax credit and other ways to help because that helps everybody. That's not just picking and choosing those who choose to work and subsidizing how they care for their children. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about one of the best programs I've found to help vulnerable families who have new babies, and that's the home visiting program. This is something that this program is for families who have new babies or young children, and a professional comes to their home and checks on them. And obviously they can choose to participate or not, but this professional can be a nurse or it can be somebody who's a volunteer or it can be somebody who's trained in a certain program type, but they help mentor, they help that family connect to resources, they check in with them, they say, hey, here's a book, you should read this to your child every night or whatever. They come up with parenting ideas. There are metrics that show it's a great way to overcome and prevent childhood trauma. It actually helps prevent child abuse because you have somebody that's coming to the home to see the safety of the home, check on the mental health of the parents to see if they're doing okay, see if they have questions. These parents feel like they have somebody in their corner, and it's such a great program. So there's federal dollars that do this program that we run through the state, and that program currently serves 600 vulnerable families. But the Office of Families pushed a couple years ago to get funding from the state government to expand this program and do a pilot program. And the pilot program would look at different ways you could do the home visiting program so you can assess the needs of those families and serve more people because it would be less expensive. And so we're really excited about that. It's such a good program. You can see from this slide that it's cheaper sometimes to do prevention, like the home visiting program, than it is to pay for the foster care system, for instance, or incarceration later, or other things that can happen because these families didn't get the support they needed. And so this is a good investment because it prevents other problems later on. All right, I've talked a lot about some proactive upstream policies that we can do to strengthen marriage and families. This shows some of the things that it can lead to. So when we are looking at strengthening marriage and families, it can lead to lower public assistance costs. It leads to healthier communities, reduced crime rates, higher educational attainment, workforce readiness, and increased civic participation. And those things lead to higher social capital, like we talked about in the beginning, and something our state is known for and why we're so successful. We appreciate these great partners. It's really one of the secrets to success is that there's so many knowledgeable institutions of higher learning. There's caring nonprofit organizations, generous philanthropists, and smart policy wonks who work for us to make Utah a better place, work with us to make Utah a better place. So we appreciate them. But we need you as well. Lift up those around you. Turn down the political heat and love your family and friends regardless of their political leanings. Continue to serve others. Relish your family relationships. Put in the hard work to make marriage successful. These are things that will ultimately improve your life and the lives of those around you. Strong families make for successful communities. And with that, I'm happy to open this up for any questions that anyone has. So here's my contact information before I stop sharing my screen. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me as well after this presentation. But it's great that I've been able to come and share these things with you and talk about the things that the state of Utah is doing to strengthen families. So with that, I am going to go to the Q&A. Let's see. Okay, so Jaylee is online and she said in the success sequence, is there data on pursuing college? Often there's no full-time job, but couples are married. You know, funny enough, I think you and I know that when you pursue post-secondary education, whether it's some training of some kind or college, that you have better job prospects, right? But when they studied the data on the success sequence, they didn't account for that. It was purely on finishing high school, graduating high school, having a full-time job, and getting married before having children. And that's what the data was tracked on. So you and I could probably ascertain that, of course, you're going to be even more successful if you get that post-secondary training of some sort. But that data set isn't part of it. So anyway, we have another question here. Are you aware of successful government efforts in the world that have increased birth rates? I assume the social capital systems are more influential while slow to affect change. Um, it's funny because we are seeing so many governments like even offer to pay people to have babies, and sometimes that doesn't even work. So, one of the things that there's different theories out there. Sure, the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, things like that may deter people from having more children. But we do know that there's a lot of data that shows that sometimes people have more children because of a sense of, I don't want to say duty, as that's not the right word. It's more of, there's a book called Hannah's Children that you should read. It's really, really good. But she talks to women who have these big families to understand why. And these are successful women who have given up a career and have, large number of kids, 6, 7, 8 kids. And it all came back to them of like, I feel like I have a higher sense of purpose. Like when I have these children, like there's nothing more important than this. And so it's almost that sense of purpose that drives people more than money or material wealth. So I don't know. There's differing viewpoints on that. Okay, we have a question from Alan. How have recent Supreme Court rulings affected Utah efforts to manage and restrict youth digital access? So, oh, hold on, it's jumping around here. So we just had a Supreme Court ruling that said that, so it upheld a Texas law that said that you can do age verification to verify whether somebody is 18 or older to access, for instance, pornography sites. And so been a great example of a recent Supreme Court ruling that's affected how we can do youth digital access. And it's funny because suddenly some of these companies, like social media companies and pornography websites, are now going, oh, we know how to age verify, where before they were acting like they couldn't do it and it was impossible, and now they're doing it. So kind of funny. In fact, I'll tell you an interesting thing about age verification is we've looked at our social media bills. Um, there is so much facial recognition technology that can identify your age just by looking at you on a screen. And the social media companies are really good at it. So they have a pretty good idea just from screen visual how old somebody is. But there was a company from France who reached out to me and showed me their technology. They had technology where if you wave your hand in front of a camera, they can tell your age within 3 months just by your hand. So kind of crazy, but there is really awesome technology out there that can help us keep our kids safe. And so that Texas ruling by the Supreme Court was a huge win, I think, for everyone, so that we can keep kids safe from harmful content. All right, I have another question here. Kimberly, can you share your beginning slides again about the benefits of children growing up in a two-parent household? Is this data based on heterosexual couples only? Um, it is not just heterosexual couples. And what I'm going to do something even better, Kimberly. If you will email me, I will send you my slide deck in a PDF form so that you have all my slides. But again, my email is AWN, it's my initials, Aimee Winder Noon, AWN at utah.gov. So send me an email. I'll send you my slide presentation. But yeah, it's not specific to heterosexual or homosexual couples. It was just two-parent homes. So anyway, if there are any other questions? Okay. Well, it's been such a pleasure to be with you today, and I'll turn it back to Naya.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today, and thank you, Aimee, for that amazing presentation. Just a reminder to stay on until the end to fill out the short survey. And I would just like to thank everybody again for joining us today and for everybody's participation. We will be done for the day, but thank you again, Aimee.
Thanks.